Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Annette
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Point of order. The Honourable Dr. Nixon.
I made reference to differences.
Order. Just, if you're going to table a document, just
I seek leave to table a document prepared by Grant Cleland from the Parliamentary Library for budgets over the last 20 years, comparing that which was announced on budget night as compared with the actuals.
I'll put the leave. Leave sought to table that particular information. Is there any objection?
Yes, there is. It's all on the public record.
Order. Honourable
No, it hasn't actually.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it is time to ask at this time of the electoral cycle what we look for in a government and what do we look for in the leader of a government. And I think the answer to those two questions must be integrity, ethics and morals, trustworthiness, truthfulness and sincerity. So the next question that I would then ask this Parliament, they're responding before I even get to it. That's kind of like they're admitting defeat before I even start. But I'd say the next question, Mr. Speaker, must be, does this current government and its leader, John Key, have integrity? Do they have ethics and morals? Are they truthful? Are they trustworthy? And are they sincere? Thank you. Well, I think it's fair to say, after almost 7 years, the government did start out with, they were keen, they were eager, they were cooperative, they were very, very excited after 9 years in opposition. But 7 years later, almost on all those fundamental measures of good leadership and government that I've mentioned today, this government is a failure. They are a failure. John Key now acts on the understanding of what he can get away with, never be found out, and what he can cover up. Right. And there's a mounting number of examples of deception, of trickery, of evasion and duplicity, and downright Tory arrogance. And if you wanted to see Tory arrogance, you saw it today. You saw it in question time today. And it started with the Prime Minister, who didn't answer a single question but attacked every other party in this House that's not in government. You then were followed by Stephen Joyce, who is the most self-satisfied, smug member of the government, and Tolly, who kept saying, one more sleep, when she wouldn't answer questions about the budget that weren't even about the budget but about what she'd done towards it. Then we had Simon Bridges, the cabin boy, who stood up and insulted New Zealand first, and the doozy of them all, Tim Grosser, who's been going around the world grossing out all the people we'd like to do trade with. He's the man headed for Washington. He's going to be our man over there in a diplomatic role. What an embarrassment. Well, this government made some pretty big solemn promises to New Zealand before the last election, not just orally. They put them in pamphlets and stuffed them through just about everybody's letterbox in New Zealand. Then they sent letters, personal address letters paid by the taxpayer, signed, yours sincerely, by the Prime Minister. And now we're told those promises are just mere suggestions. They are just aspirational goals. They're nice to haves. And the latest one of all is from the Prime Minister. He said, they were never promises in the first place. So the promises that were solemn promises are not promises now, according to the Prime Minister. Well, there's a good word for that, Mr. Speaker. It's called chicanery. That's what it is. It's chicanery. And that now describes the modus operandi of this government. So let's look at some of the trickery and duplicity of this government that New Zealanders are experiencing. What did they promise around wages? They told us they'd be increased by 7,000 by 2017, and now the Prime Minister tells us it'll only be half that. They promised 150,000 new jobs. Now they can only deliver half of that promise, according to the Prime Minister. They promised balanced books, Mr. Smith. They promised balanced books, and now we're going to have a 5 to 6 million deficit. Never really mattered. Didn't really care if we had a deficit or not. That's not not what was said last year, solemn promises to New Zealand. They promised that housing would be more affordable. Well, what a big fat fabrication that was. We've seen house price inflation running at 14.6% per year. Auckland house prices rising by 63% under this government. And I think the Prime Minister said there's no crisis. But this week he finally said, I think they're rising faster than is healthy. He then said they've been going up a little more rapidly than we would like. So finally they know there's a problem and they're trying to put the cotton wool around it. This government is not being honest with New Zealanders. They don't show the moral fibre they ought to have as a government. They have become tired, they have become arrogant, and they ought to leave this parliament.
Mr. Speaker.